You're listening to the Comic Crusaders podcast. I am your host, Al Mega, CEO of Comic Crusaders and Undercover Capes. In this show, I'm sitting down with creators from all walks of life to talk about inspiration, process, the lessons they've learned, and a whole lot more.
Well, hola, mi gente, this is your boy Al Mega. Welcome to a brand new Comic Crusaders podcast. And today, I'm not flying solo. Today, I have an amazing homie chilling with me. He is the EIC of Comic Crusaders. He is the host of Outside the Panels, the Film Crusade, a panelist on the Old Timers Comic Book Show. He's from across the pond. Here's my boy, the one, the only La Machina himself, Johnny the Machine Hughes.
Hola, ¿cómo está?
How you doing, homie? Glad to have you on today to chit chat with this legend that's also from around your hood. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, maybe used to be. I think he's moved on since then somewhat.
Oh, yes, it's the last time for sure, but he's an OG from the hood. I mean, a godfather of you will, of the, UK comic scene, smashing it. I mean, amazing creations, very known for the 2000 AD, his rebellious nature in the industry, not giving a crap, just doing what he got to do. And he's here today, too, to share all those stories, and more, to help you be even a better storyteller, a better writer, how to work with people in this amazing book he got out right now called Pageturners. I mean, I was checking that out, and I'm digging the stories, wonderful examples. I mean, Pat is Pat. He is the man. That's right. There's only one Pat, the one and only Mr. Pat Mills. Baby, how you doing?
Hi, guys. Hi.
Hello.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Pat. I appreciate you taking some time out your day, man. Last time we spoke, you were just freshly moved to Spain. So, let me ask you, are you still out there? And if so, how's it going for you?
It's going fantastic. Yeah, we're still here. We've moved up to the mountains, and I won't really say too much about how good the weather is because British viewers will be thinking, yeah, we're going through a storm. No, it's I'm kind of a bit paranoid about weather, so this really suits me very well. Yeah.
Excellent. And I guess that fresh mountain air has also kept you quite busy, because you have not stopped working since then. So talk about since getting to Spain and keeping busy.
Yeah, I think it all kind of started with the system we have in Britain, where to make a living you've got to write a lot of stuff, and maybe it's the same in the States, with Marvel and DC, but I don't think quite so bad. So we have to become really prolific, and that's my background. That's why there are so many stories with my name on it. And once you're in the groove there, you feel compelled to write, and it's hard to stop. It's like a musician. I mean, does a musician stop at a certain age? Because he's, I don't know,
some should,
enough money. Yeah, well, some should. Yeah,
some should. I'm not going to name names, but there's some should.
That's probably true for comic writers as well. But
but Pat, your catalogue's huge. Well, everyone knows you from 2000 AD,
right.
But you've written across the UK comics industry. Not just 2000 AD, not just stories for that. I see your name on Misty and things like that. It's kind of like, how do you kind of think to yourself, I'm going to write, and then you've got to write so many different genres. And you've got to bear in mind, and people might not know this, but in the UK, it is pretty much 2000 AD centric.
Yes.
In the UK, 2000 AD is Marvel and DC, and everybody else is independents.
Yes, that's exactly it. Yeah. How does that all come about? I think for me personally, I think I'm driven by what I write, And that brings me back, of course, to Pageturners, because what I talk about in Pageturners is the source of my inspiration, the muse. What inspires us. And one of the points I make in Pageturners is, maybe when we start writing, we think, oh, I'd like to write for Marvel or DC or 2000 AD, whoever it is. But what my book covers is, why do you write? And that's something, new young writers often say to me, what tips would you give me? And the first thing I say to them is, you've got to ask yourself, why are you writing? And if the answer is, well, I think it's a cool thing to do, and I might make money, working for DC or whoever it is, that's not really the answer. The answer is, there's something within you that makes you want to write, and you have to get in touch with what that source is. I think there's an assumption that you don't really go there. You don't really look at that. And that's because of our very shut down society. But you have to go there, and the answers may surprise you. I certainly made that journey, and I cover it in Pageturners. So to give a kind of brief example, anything that challenges society, that will inspire me. If I wrote something that was very, what shall we say, pro-establishment, like writing something for Disney as such, right?
All right.
I could never be inspired, and even if I somehow made it work, it would not be accepted, because there's kind of invisible forces at work, and things that you're meant to do happen, things that you're not meant to do. And one of the things I'm not meant to do is write for Disney. So it's probably a relief to big fans of Disney. But there you go.
I don't know. I think I could see Judge Mickey Mouse. I think he'd be pretty cool.
Because Mickey Mouse dressed more like martial law all of a sudden.
Yeah. Pluto was the ABC warrior.
It's a lot of fun when you get in touch with what you can call the muse. And the muse applies to everything. It applies to what you guys are doing. It applies to musicians, painters, and so on. And if you get in touch with why you want to do the stuff you're doing, then it really charges you up, and it does actually make you prolific. Apart from the need to make money and make a living, it does really burn through you, and it looks after you as well. So that's a very long way of describing one prime reason why I write so much stuff, and still do.
Do you have, let me ask, I get that you want to be the kind of anti-establishment, you kind of want to say something that has a little bit of contrast to what we see on a daily basis. Do you have a particular favorite genre in which you like to try and flex those muscles? I imagine, for example, science fiction is quite easy to use as that kind of metaphor for change, because it's science and it's fiction. So anything goes, right?
Yes.
Yes. But then in stuff like Misty, where it's more interpersonal, it's a young girl kind of trying to deal with what she's going through at a young age. That's a different type of kind of, I suppose, nose up to the establishment, because those books weren't done at the time. So do you have a particular genre that you like to dabble your anti-contextualism at?
I think that's very well observed what you said. I think that's very true. Science fiction is the obvious one, but there's a catch with science fiction. There's a big catch with it, which is that you can fall in love with the wrapping paper rather than what's inside the wrapping paper. So if it's set on a planet far, far away, you can say, well, that's nothing to do with Earth. What's going on there? Or you've got this cruel oppression and, you know, whatever's going on, you can say, so what? You know what I mean? And I think that does happen a bit. People can, I mean, Judge Dredd is a case in point, where the satire of it is sometimes lost. And people kind of like the uniforms and everything.
Exactly.
Say, hey, this is pretty cool. So I think that's very well. That's a very good point you made, and that's why, for example, I wrote some time ago, and I'm writing something not dissimilar today, called Charlie's War, which is a story set in World War I, where there is no wrapping paper. The message is very strong. There's humor, there's pathos, so it's not dark and depressing, so you want to slit your wrists. You know what I mean? There has to be comedy, there has to be humanity. But there's no wrapping paper. There's no sugar on the pill, if you like. Now, when you say about Misty, I would have to think about that one. I think that's quite. I think you got me there a little bit. I think there's aspects of Misty exploring fear, personal journeys.
Personal changes, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. I think the muse that drives me would include those. But it's significant, you know, that having done Misty, started it off, although I lobby for Misty all the time and I talk about it often and I, you know, encourage people to write supernatural girl stories, I've never had the chance to write any more myself. In other words, Misty, that was it. Yeah. So it's like the muse said, okay, that's your lot. Back to science fiction, back to Charlie's War, and so on. So I think, I wouldn't say it was a cul-de-sac, but it wasn't part of my main journey, my main writing journey, perhaps.
No, I mean, war comics are synonymous with British comics industry. Just recently, we got talking about Commando on a different show. Do you remember those pocket books you used to get from the British Library? You know, so war stories are quite a British tradition. So,
and they're still going. They're still going to this day. Yeah.
I just had a few out with, I think, is it Johnny Rebel or Johnny Red? I think it is, the air pilot.
I'm not sure he's got them with Commando, but he's some of our early a comic that John Wagner, the writer creator of Judge Dredd, and we started Battle, and I think Garth has reinvigorated Battle, if you like, in the last couple of years or so, and of course leading up to Battle's 50th anniversary, which I think is next year. So maybe we'll have something there.
Back in the 80s, I was reading Star Wars comics. My brother was reading Battle Action Force. So there you go. Action Force. For those of you who don't know, Action Force is the UK version of G.I. Joe, pretty much. So
there we go. Yeah, I love listening to this because, all right, I got to check out these pocketbooks. I know we had our own pocketbooks, but I got to check those out. So, Pat, let me ask you. You talk about relationships in the book, it's specific with editors, you know, and with new writers stepping in, you know, having thick skins. You know, talk about that journey, and you know, how important is that nowadays for young writers to have that thick skin with the environment the way it is?
Yeah, you've got to have a really thick skin. That's a simple answer. I think the point that I make in Pageturners, which I think is a really important one, is that most writing guides will tell you, they'll say, well, look, if you do this, this, and this, and you follow the story rules, whether it applies to writing Spider-Man or an independent or whatever, doors will open for you. And, well, they might open a little bit, but they're not really going to open because it's about personalities. So alongside everything else, if you're a new writer, you've got to weigh up, who are you dealing with? Who's the editor? And I describe this in Pageturners, where I think one of the best examples is when on Doctor Who, where I was commissioned to do a TV, a 4-part Doctor Who on Space Whale. And I went through, it was endlessly revised, and after 4 seasons of it being on hold, eventually they said, yeah, it's great, we're going for it. And then 3 months later, they said, no, we've changed our minds. We're not going for it. So as you can imagine, I was quite heartbroken at the time. And I thought, and I described this in the book, but the relevance is that I went to a writer's workshop, and I because I wanted to get to the bottom of it. And so I talked to the script editors who are in charge of it, who had a background at the BBC. And I said, look, was it my dialogue? Was it the plot? Was it? And they said, wait a minute, don't beat yourself up. And this is a really important message for any new writer. They said, who was the commissioning editor? And I said, well, that was a guy called Chris Bidmead. And they said, and who was the guy who rejected it? And I said, well, that wasn't Chris Bidmead. That was a later script editor. And he said, well, that's why. He said, because he didn't commission it. So if you're commissioned by one editor, and then for whatever reason the editor leaves, and another editor comes along, he's going to think, who's this guy? And why should I back him? I've got my own people and my own projects. It's human nature, after all. But I mean, we're not going back that far in time, but it was a revelation to me. So that's why I would pass it on to new writers, because I hate for them to go through the torture that I went through. That kind of feeling of, oh my God, what did I do wrong? So that's a useful tip, and there are others like that in the book. Yeah.
So does that kind of change of stewardship, does that occur in comic books as much as it does in TV then? Or
yes, it does. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And there's, I don't know if I included examples on 2000 AD, but certainly changes of editors. There's a tendency, and not just in 2000 AD, I'm sure it's true for Marvel and DC as well, and probably every other magazine or comic that's out there. A new editor gets appointed. Now, there's an art form to taking over an existing magazine, and the majority of editors who take over do not have that skill, that talent. And some of them will think, hey, I'm a new broom. We're going to get rid of all the old guys. We're going to get rid of this guy, that guy, and the other guy. And I can understand that because, if we've been around the block a while, it's arguable that we can get a little complacent and so forth. And, the editor thinks, right, well, they all need to kick up the arse. And maybe that's true on occasion. But that kind of punitive approach doesn't actually yield results, because the readers are locked in to all those writers and artists. So if you get rid of them, you're going to replace them with a bunch of new guys. And it doesn't matter how talented they are, there is going to be that resistance to them. You're going to say, well, okay, Chris Claremont's gone, but who's this new guy? Bill Smith, I don't know who he is. You know what I mean? And so it does apply. You probably know far more about this than I do, but from what little I hear, it has applied certainly to Marvel and DC. Definitely. So new brooms have to be very careful, I think.
I think it's to throw the baby out with the bathwater, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, it's very difficult to take over an existing successful magazine or comic and keep it running along the same railway lines, but giving it a certain freshness. And I have to give all credit to Matt Smith on 2000 AD, because round about the millennium, 2000 AD was in huge trouble because it had at least 2 new brooms who had tried to turn it into something else. They tried to turn it into a lads magazine, or a bit more adult, or bring in new writers. And Matt Smith brought it back to its roots And of course, a lot of the damage was done by then because there was quite a drop in sales. And I don't know how far he managed to get some of those readers back, but he certainly brought 2000 AD back to its roots. And that's quite an achievement. In other words, it requires a real balance that I've never been in that situation because all I've done is actually create comics. I don't know whether I would be the right person to revive something that's already in existence and give it a shot in the arm. I might have a little bit too much of that new broom. So it comes back to ultimately to personalities and writers who are caught in the middle of this. It's not enough to have a great story and to say, well, I followed all the rules. You've got to weigh out the editor and the publisher and think, do they really want my work? And are they behind me? And you've really got to listen to what I would call your inner voice. And you probably won't because you think, I'm desperate to succeed. You know?
Oh, we see this in independent books, don't we? Where certain writers or certain projects will jump from publisher to publisher until it finds a home. And then that's the publisher that gets the idea and then goes with the book, right?
Yeah. I think independent publishing, which I'm very much part of now, has been great for me because it means I don't have to compromise as much as I might have done before, whoever I was working for. I mean, I still work for various publishers as well, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to kind of go off the rails and write lots of ultraviolet or pornographic stuff or anything like that. On the contrary, when you're independent and you want to sell books, you really want to reach that audience. So you're not going to go out on a limb. You know what I mean? You think, okay, what does the public want? And that's really important. And it's not something, I think it's something that in the States and in Britain we recognize. The French can be different because for the French, they see it as art first of all. So they create a beautiful piece of art in bande dessinée, a story and art. And then the audience find them. But as you know, in Britain and the States, it's the other way around. We think, right, what do the audience want? They want more Spider-Man, they want more Judge Dredd, whatever it is. And we go for it accordingly.
Okay. Cool. All right. So you also talk about relationships between a writer and an artist, especially in writing. How do you tackle that nowadays? Because I mean, back in the day, I guess you were in an office. Now you're remotely. You are where you are at. I mean, how do you handle those projects and those relationships now as compared to then?
Well, I think in terms of communication, it's probably no different to when I was in the UK and meeting up with these artists physically. I mean, I still meet up with them from time to time anyway. But I think the relationship between a writer and an artist is so important. And from a comic writer's point of view, if you team up with the wrong artist, it's going to lead you into some bad places. And because I mean, just to give you an example, the artist may keep you stringing along for a long time. And I'll give you an example of that in my own experience. I think it's next year that, or maybe it's the end of this year, that Joe Pineapples by Simon Bisley and Clint Langley finally appears in book form. Wow. And you know when I wrote the story? 9 years ago. So in other words, it was I mean, I can't speak for Simon, but I would guess it would be what he might have called his rainy day, his bottom drawer story, that he does when he hasn't got anything else on that's quite
every Sunday he did a panel, Pat. That's what it was. Every Sunday he did one panel and put it away.
Yeah, so I mean, there's all those kind of things that can happen, and I explore all that, and I think the differences in relationships with artists. I mean, there are, the first rule is there are no rules. So it might be that in one relationship, you know, I'm the boss. In another relationship, the artist is the boss. So, for example, just thinking of Requiem, which is that's Requiem Vampire Night.
Lovely.
Which is volume 12 is finally coming out in April.
Now, that one right there. I mean, look at that. Jesus, that is some show porn, Pat. Let me tell you. Jeez, look at that. Beautiful.
It's amazing, isn't it? Well, I mean, it will come as no surprise to you that in this relationship with the artist Olivier Ledoux, he's very much the boss, because he's the guy with the major French fan following. I mean, obviously they've got to like my story as well, because otherwise you might as well just have just lots of pretty pictures or scary pictures and no script. But he would be, if you like, the senior partner. And then there would be other projects I have on the go or have had on the go where we're maybe more equal. I mean, Kevin O'Neill would be a good example. The projects I did with Kevin, where on martial law or Nemesis or ABC Warriors, we would be very much equal. In other words, we'd both be putting the same amount of input into it. And then there'll be others where I might be the senior partner. I mean, it's just like a marriage, really, I think. And often they end in divorce as well.
I've got to ask the question. If the first rule is there are no rules, is the second rule don't talk about Fight Club?
Or rather, Right Club, right? You know, you know. So, Pat, talk to me too, because I know Doctor Who big celebration. I know you've been a part of that too. I have a video. Let me add that here. I got a little scene with you. Look at here. You know, talking some business. Let me play this real quick and talk about this celebration that you have been.
Else, things that seem
right. Yeah.
So
it's absolutely spot on. I couldn't imagine this better. This is what I was saying in my head.
That's so malevolent. That's brilliant. Wonderful. Yeah. And then equally, you can have these sinister characters who are actually good guys, and that's really at the heart of the way I write. Seeing that validated in this really epic way is actually quite important to me, I think.
I'm pleased when you saw it.
I have to say, I watched the episode live on over Christmas, and it came on. I think it was just before Christmas, actually. And I saw your name come up on it, and I just started laughing to myself. And my wife was like, "What are you laughing for?" I was like, "It's Pat Mills, 2000 AD." I've spoken to Pat. I know Pat. And it was just so gratifying to see such a British institution like Doctor Who celebrating British writers and artists who created the story in the first place. So well done, sir.
Thank you. Well, it was a great thrill, obviously, and it was the fact that Dave and my Starbeast story started the reboot of Doctor Who. So it was with Russell's new season. So thinking back on it, I mean, it was just the right story. I think this actually hits an important note, because that story, when I wrote it a lifetime ago, somewhere in the early 80s, I think, something like that. There are several things that today we would think was absolutely normal, and so what? In other words, there was a black companion for the Doctor. There was a very working class feeling to it, and so forth. But there was a period in Doctor Who, which coincided with my 4 seasons before I got finally kicked out, where it was very middle class, and that actually is an important thing to observe, because British television and perhaps film as well are very. There is a strong middle class element, and so, for example, the script editor at the time said, "You can't have a working class captain of a spaceship." And I said, "Well, I happen to know of such a captain," and so on. And he said, "But it doesn't matter." So Starbase is a vindication of having things that we take for granted today, that can be much more egalitarian and so forth. But that's relatively new. And there's always you probably don't get it in the States in the same way, that a lot of people in media are quite elitist. So in publishing, people will tend to have a very middle class approach and so forth. And it's been commented in the British press how a lot of people with working class backgrounds have not come through as actors or writers like myself and so forth. So it's really good of Russell that he did that. There's an important subtext to that. So I really thank him for that. He's brought that feeling through. And as I say, a black companion was unheard of years ago. You just couldn't have something like that. And to me, when I was writing it, it just seemed perfectly normal. Let's give him a different companion with a different bit of background and so forth.
Cool.
And in Pageturners, though, I want people to be aware it's not just about comic book writing. It is this TV writing and more so, correct? Throughout the journey, the whole spectrum of writing and the journey of it. I mean, what compelled you to put together this book, and especially during this time?
Well, I think it's the realization that some things, if you want to pass information on to a new generation. So, I mean, just to pick on something that's fairly self-evident, but I think a lot of writers might feel, if I find the right agent, then all my, everything is solved, right? And it's not solved. It's actually the beginning of your journey, not the end. Because I've had agents who are at the top of the tree and at the bottom of the tree, and there are problems at both ends. And finding an agent is very, very difficult. And again, that's not covered, to the best of my knowledge, in my particular writing guru, Robert McKee, who wrote Story. He doesn't cover these things. Like you've really got to spend time looking for the right agent. And another thing that it's a taboo subject, which I cover, and I'm not sure I cover it as well as some other people might, which is networking. In other words, schmoozing. A lot of people find work through schmoozing, and schmoozing is an art form as well. You know what I mean? You do too much schmoozing. When are you ever going to write a story? Oh no, I was out partying last night. Okay. And I've known, sadly, writers who spent all their energy networking. So they would have a little black book with phone numbers to die for. You know what I mean? Everybody's famous, producers, actors, and so on. But they didn't get their work past the gate. And that's because they spent all their time schmoozing. So but just talking about networking is really important. And there's probably someone out there who's much better at it than I am, and I should really be reading his book to see how they do it. I mean, I can network to a degree, but I think like a lot of creators, you actually get used to your own company, and you live in your own dream world of, you know, fantasy, monsters, and so on. And the thought, oh, I've got to go out tomorrow night and, you know, hang out at this party. That doesn't, you know, it's okay when you're 25 maybe, but and then, you know, so those things, those are some of the things that I wanted to highlight, because you're not going to get them from other how-to books. And when I was about 25, and I probably read all the how-to books that were around at the time, and they all would more or less say, look, you write a great story, you follow the rules of construction and character and so on, and doors will open. And as I say, Pageturners is about how they will really open. And there's so much more to it, as I've example with the editor as well, for example.
I suppose schmoozing's easier when you're already established, though, right, Pat?
I guess, yeah, it is, because, well, that's the case in point, that we all are in these little, if you like, social bubbles, if you like. Still. And you go to a I suppose you know, you go along to different parties and things, and you see people working the room, you know, so that because they don't know. I mean, you know, there's a thing in that's about the line in Hollywood. She was really dumb. She slept with the writer. Where you get people working the room. And they don't know it when you've got a bunch of long-haired people. You could be a producer, you could be a director, you could be a writer. But the writer's the bottom of the pile. You know what I mean? We're the ones who have almost minimal clout. And
I can imagine it's just like one big Graham Norton show.
Yeah, I think there's something in that, and I kind of I'm just thinking back to the last time I did it, and I can remember someone saying, you know, they sort of chat, you know, that stop and chat thing. So what do you do? And I immediately say, I'm the writer, and they can't, they move on fast, you know. The producers over there, you know, the director.
Wrong guy.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, you've got to. So there's all that going on, and I think it's useful to know these things ahead of time, because I had to find out all these things the hard way, and I think it's so much better if you think, okay, that's the explanation for why things. I think one of the tips I gave as well is that you should have your own writing guru, and mine is Robert McKee on story. But I don't know if I mentioned it in the book, but it's not something you should tell a script editor, because most script editors hate Robert McKee. If you say, well, Robert McKee says, and they go, no, I don't rate him. You know what I mean? And,
here's Mr. Red Pen. Here we go.
Yeah. So you have to keep that information to yourself. But it is very useful to have a mentor, you know, a virtual mentor, if you like, where you think, okay, so this script editor is telling me that this scene is wrong. Let's see what Robert McKee says. But you don't tell the script editor that, because, I mean, it's a very subjective business anyway, you know, and so you the more that you can cut through the bull in it and really cut to the truth of the story, the better. I mean, I can think of one really talented and actually quite middle-aged creator who came up with a great story, great art. And I said, this is fantastic. And he tried several publishers and they turned him down. And I said, well, why don't you independently publish it? And he didn't want to do that, which was silly, really, because economically it's possible to publish your own stuff now, whether it's print on demand or whatever.
Kickstarter, crowdfunding.
Yeah, we're free. We're finally free. And so what he did was he went to an agent, and the agent said, "No. Why don't you change? Don't make the hero a male. Make it female. Change this ending. Change this. Change that. Change the other." And of course, he lost all his impetus. And this isn't some new kid on the block. This is a guy, as I say, in middle age, who had an background in media and everything. And I was heartbroken for him because he was so locked into the idea of, I have to find a publisher, I have to find an agent. And one of the beauties today is that, as I say, you can be independent. And if you don't have the technical skills, which my wife has, by the way, I don't know, I'm completely useless. But even if I was single, right, and I as I say, I'm pretty stupid where all these kind of things are concerned. You can hire someone who will do those things for you. So you're not. And it's so important. I think the other thing that I think there was there was a James Bond thing I was up for to write. This was before it went to whoever it was, Dynamite, I think.
Dynamite.
Yeah, but maybe a couple of years before that, with Simon Bisley, who was going to do some sample pages on James Bond, we went to Jonathan Cape, who I think were the
did it take 9 years?
and the pages were great. Simon's pages were fantastic, and but the editor at Jonathan Cape said, how many followers has Pat Mills got on Twitter and Facebook or whatever? And he said, well, the guy I'm considering, had maybe, let's say, 5 or 6 times as many followers as I did. So that's how it works these days.
Wow.
I know it's crazy. Yeah.
Wow, you blew my mind.
That means Taylor Swift should write comic books and media.
Oh my, no, don't put that out there, please.
Yeah, just say.
But celebrities do write. Celebrities certainly write books, and
don't get me started on that. That's a slippery slope. You mentioned Kickstarter and crowdfunders. I wanted to bring this up because this has probably been the biggest move in comic books over the last 15 years, is the fact that people don't have to go the traditional route for our American friends into publishing. They have to find Marvel, DC, Dynamite, whatever. They can go down the Kickstarter route. Is it therefore even more important, if you're going Kickstarter, to have that kind of guru to help you out, because you don't want to go, pardon the phrase, balls to the wall in the wrong direction and then find yourself falling flat on your face? You still need that guide to help you get your story to its pinnacle, I guess, right?
There is an art to Kickstarting, and I think I've used other methods of direct sales. In other words, I've used print on demand, which I know there are several people in the States who use print on demand. But I tell you, in the UK, they're a bit slow on it. They don't really like the idea. And I said, look at the quality of the printing. It's okay. Relax. It's going to be fine. But people are not that sure about it. Okay. And we've had several successful books out, print on demand. I'm coming quite late to the feast on Kickstarters, and in fact, I'll probably be doing a Kickstarter later this year on another project. And we've talked to. There are gurus on Kickstarter as well, and one of the reasons, as you doubtless know, is because they've kind of muddied the water, the first generation of Kickstarters, and probably the second as well, by getting the money, not delivering properly, long delays, all those kind of things. And so fans are understandably saying, no, wait a minute, I'll wait till this project is actually, scheduled to turn up, etc. So I think, and thankfully, I've got good friends who are very experienced where that's concerned, and they will give me good advice, which is primarily you've got to get the project finished, which is a little galling sometimes, because you're thinking, it's particularly for the artist. If you think of the ratio that an artist takes, say, 3 times as long as a writer. So if he's having to produce all that work for free, if you like, ahead of getting Kickstarter money. But there are other ways around it. Obviously, there's Patreon, which is important. And the particular system I use, which has worked very well for me, is Substack. Now, if you're not familiar with Substack, it's my particular site is iconoblast.substack.com, and I'm in the. Well, the people on it, there's people like you mentioned Fight Club earlier, Chuck Polinick.
Cool.
He's on Substack. A guy called Luke Jennings, who did this very successful series on which Killing Eve was based. The British.
Love season 1 of Killing Eve. We went a bit bonkers after that.
And the other one that's most relevant from a comic point of view is Brian K. Vaughan. He's on Substack as well. And so that kind of provides a role model. The thing I love about Substack is I'm writing a story on there at the moment, which will eventually be complete as a novel or a novella. But you can come out in weekly installments. Which takes us back to the weekly comic, and the cliffhanger. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. Well, I'm glad you feel the same way, because it's one of the things I loved as a kid was what's going to happen next week. And
it's a UK trope to have your weekly comic. That's how it works. It's always been like that.
Yeah, I was getting monthly, man. I'm a stateside guy, so I was on my monthly trip, and I'm kind of jealous because when they did remember the 52, and it was every week through DC. I was actually digging that every week. Oh, how does the story continue? I like that concept. I wish they would do that more out here.
But it's still good, even once a month, where you're thinking, okay, I've got to wait till next month to discover what's going to happen. There's still that sense of anticipation, but the good thing about it, and this is a text series called MI7 Assassin, and but the good thing about it is it pushes you into writing it, because otherwise, even though I've got my muse, even though it's driving me to write and all the rest of it, there's still that feeling of, oh, maybe I should give it another draft and so on. But in the case of a novel, you could be off the market for a year, maybe even 18 months. But by putting it out every week, and you get feedback from the audience and so forth. And of course, you can have, with something like Substack, and you can see it in Brian K. Vaughan's approach as well, you have paid subscribers and free subscribers as well. In other words, some parts are behind a paywall and some parts aren't. So I think that's making a difference as well. And that hasn't got quite that scary feeling that Kickstarters have these days, because of the fact that they have been, I think they've been overused a bit. And I think, I'm sure I'll get a good reaction to things when we go for a Kickstarter. But I know that fans will understandably be a little more careful today because of bad experiences in the past.
Cool. I think the current generations are pretty on top of it, though. I must admit, I speak to a lot of Kickstarter authors, writers, and a lot of them, the majority I speak to, if not all, have some level of completion. Definitely,
it's worked for them.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, that's a relief.
What can I say?
And can you tell us a bit about this that's dropping in April too before we go? Because I want people to know where to be spending their money, not just on Pageturners, which is available now, and I have the link below because it's available on Amazon. But what's going on here? Because again, when I saw this cover power you sent me, I was like, just I'm floored. I mean, dude.
Okay.
Who is this?
All right. Well, the artist Olivier Ledoir is probably, I would say, he's the top French artist alive today. You know, he's in the tradition of Mobius and Bilal and so forth. And this is volume 12, which we produced together 11 volumes. And we hit some problems with one publisher when we switched to another publisher. And so there's been a delay of, I'm just trying to think how many years, probably about 8 years. So this is long awaited. This is the long awaited penultimate volume of Requiem. Requiem Vampire Night. The story is set in hell. I'll just maybe just
look too. Jeez, hold on.
Wow, look at that, Scotch.
Look at this. Oh my God.
Now the other thing with that, let me see if I can find that's another rather lovely page.
Oh wow! Look at those colors too.
Very nice.
Yeah, he's
the lettering.
I mean, he's just fantastic, and I think wow, yeah, he's very red.
Yeah.
You just know there are other colors, right?
Well, I mean, he's just an incredibly talented guy who, you know, to produce this quality of work. And I'll just show you one more spread, and then I'll just explain.
That's gorgeous.
Oof. Wow, look at the detail on the face over there in that background. Wow.
So the situation is it comes out in France. The English edition on paper, you're going to have to wait a hell of a long time. Now, what we found in the States, we have our biggest following for digital, which I am so pleased, because Brits are much more resistant to digital. They go, no, I'll wait for the paper edition. And I say to them, look, there are problems with the paper edition. You're going to have to wait years. And they say, no, I'm waiting for the paper edition. Now, the only thing I haven't tried, and I don't know, it doesn't seem to have caught on, but no one talks about it, is running a Google translator over the French edition. In other words, the French edition.
Never even thought of that.
In other words, running your mobile phone over the, you know,
the words.
And, yeah, because the way I would look at it without, yeah, I mean, the words are important, especially as I'm the writer. Yeah, you know, at the end of the day, you're looking at this beautiful artwork, and as far as I know, I've never heard anyone talk about it. It must go on, because there are some beautiful French volumes, which it takes years for them to end up as English editions. And so what do you do? But the alternative is, if you are digitally inclined, and we have a big digital following on Requiem, the digital edition will be out in April as well. And as I say, most of our audience is in the States, you know, or maybe Australia, and a much smaller percentage in Britain, where they go, no, I'm waiting for the paper.
Well,
Johnny, what are you doing this to your creators out there, huh? As a fan, why are you making your creators have to print on paper and wait? How dare you?
What can I say? I agree with Stanley on this one. Stanley has allegedly said back in the day that, hey, I like looking at boobs in pictures, but I'd rather have one in my hand.
Well, it stands the man.
Enough said.
Enough said. Yeah.
Yeah, somebody said a mouthful there, or a handful rather. I dig it. All right, so Pat, are you doing any conventions? Can we see you any place this year? Any tours, whether they're out there in Europe or you coming to the States? What's going on with you and your convention schedule, if at all?
Well, this sounds quite dismal. No one's invited me.
Get yourself to Thought Bubble. Thought Bubble in November. That's where you need to be.
Yeah.
Well, the thing when we if we go over to the UK under our own speed, it's quite a jaunt, if you know what I mean. In other words, because so it's a week of your time gone. That's my excuse, and it sounds a bit pathetic, but
do I give up the sunshine for a week of November rain?
Yeah, well, I mean that happened to me with the lakes. I got invited several times to the lakes, and from memory, it's sometime in the spring or in the winter. I can't remember exactly when. It's certainly not in the summer, that's for sure. And I thought to myself, well, it takes over a day to get there because you've got to. It's not a straightforward route to the lakes. It's a great event, but so it's a day at least traveling. Actually, a bit more from the part of Spain I come from, and the same on the way back. And it's going to be pouring with rain because I've been to the lakes as a tourist and it was always raining. So. I'm thinking to myself, well, I could be sitting here in Spain, writing a story, keeping my schedule up, because that's the other thing I think that is perhaps, I would say, is a little more important than conventions, which is delivering on time. So if I say to my readers that I'm going to get the story out by such and such a date, they know that I will. But I think that said, I think the last 2 or 3 years have probably been working on particular projects that just kind of, I don't know, maybe disappear from the map, if you like. But there are places I always fond to look for reasons to go to. And the number one being, of course, Glasgow, Scotland, because Scotland. Pardon?
Oh no, not Scotland.
Oh, absolutely. Oh yes. Because the thing with Scotland, and I can't say this enough, is that it's such a different country to England, and it's the true cultural home of comics, and they're grounded in comics there in a way you probably don't have the equivalent in the States. I don't know, East Coast versus West Coast or whatever. But Scotland is they have got such an affection for comics. And I love Glasgow anyway. So that's probably where I might go at some point. And also, of course, once Requiem is out, Requiem 12, I will probably do some French events because, as I say, I've been off the radar while Requiem was off the radar, but now it's back. And French conventions are absolutely fantastic. There's one going on at the moment, Angoulême, which is the equivalent of San Diego. It's if anyone is ever thinking in European terms, you need to book in. I think it's what are we in January? So Angoulême is a major event, and it's a relatively small city town. So, you need to book your hotel early. It's probably the same in San Diego, I think. I mean, I have been. But if you want a nice hotel, don't leave it to the last minute. Otherwise, you'll be staying in some dreadful place that's 20 clicks out from the city. So I'll probably maybe do Angoulême next year, I would think, because by then Requiem will be out, and I have things to talk to fans about. So.
Well, I mean, but you got Pageturners to talk about and do them panels and teach that young generation how not to get hustled and get their work out there. Because that's what I love about what you put this out for there. You know what I mean? That mentorship style of writing, teaching people the what up, giving them, your truth as your sword, and dropping names when you had to. Again, that's why I love Pat Mills. Ever since I seen you on that 2018 documentary saying, well, if somebody calls you asking you about your character, first thing you should ask is, what the fuck do you want to do with my character? Guess that has stuck with me so hard with a lot of things. So I appreciate you and your time, man. And as a fan of what you've done, again, just thank you for putting your creativity out there and showing us. I mean, because look at you, still a young man and still at the top of your game.
Thank you so much. You're very kind. Thank you.
And so my man, Johnny, let them know where they got to tune into, because you are a boss and UCPN rocking shows week in and week out. So let them know what they got to be listening to.
All right. Okay. So if you like it, go, Pat.
Okay. So I'll obviously post your links on all my social media tomorrow and so on. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we definitely got to share. Thank you so much, Pat. We appreciate you.
Okay. Fantastic.
All right, have a great time. All right. Bye-bye.
Cheers,
all
man.
Right,
bye.
Cheers. Bye. Johnny, let them know.
Right. So if you like DC books, check out the Definitive Crusade for everything that's DC comic books. We even talk about some animation every now and again. That drops fortnightly. You want to talk about Marvel, check out the No Price podcast on alternative weeks. If you like your comics of a certain vintage, don't forget to check out the Old Timers Comic Book Show, where the hosts aren't old, but the comics most certainly are. And if, like tonight's show, you like hearing from creators, whether that be writers, artists, whatever, or Kickstarters from Marvel, DC, we've got them all. Check out Outside the Panels.
There we go. What do you think? Isn't Pat Mills amazing? Still the top of the game for real. And Sherry, I mean, he got such a great energy, man.
The dude is he's just, I don't know what he's smoking, I don't know what he's drinking, but it's keeping him going. Great energy, great ideas, so into his creative juices, it's unbelievable. He's absolutely a legend of UK comic books.
Yeah, an icon for sure, and I'm glad to have him on, and get another chance to speak to him. So, make sure you check him out at all his socials. I'm going to show this one more time before we go today. To follow Pat on his Facebook or X at Pat Mills Comics. And of course, as he mentioned, check out his Substack at iconoblast.substack.com, and check out his book, Pageturners, out now on Amazon. All right. It's fire. You know what I mean? If somebody's interested in writing, let me tell you, my man definitely got some words and advice for you. And with that, I'm Al Mega with the amazing Máquina, the machine. We're out. Hasta la próxima.
Adios.
Thank you for listening to the Comic Crusaders podcast. If you like the content, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Also, please visit comiccrusaders.shop and our extended podcast family over at undercovercapes.com. And also, make sure to download the Comic Crusaders app on the Google Play Store today.